Hello, I'm Sophie Beal, one of the co-hosts of Beneath the Page, the podcast about books and the writers behind them. This is part 2 of our epic interview with Andrew Shanahan, best-selling dystopian author. Steve Couch, my co-host, has just asked him about his first novel, Before and After.
So Before and After is about Ben, who is 601 pounds and he's a shut-in. So that means that he's agoraphobic. He hasn't been outside of his flat for 9 years when the book starts. And he is struggling with anxiety massively around, his weight, around the world outside of his window, basically. And he's very quickly pushed to confront that because he is being removed from his 4th floor flat by a crane because he can no longer use the lift inside the flats to go to hospital to have his leg amputated because he's diabetic. And as he's wrapped up and ready to be craned out of his flat, the world ends, which is pretty inconvenient. And he's trapped in the flat with his dog, Brown, and it's a story about what happens to them from that point onwards.
You are the reason that I spend my Friday nights weighing fat men. Would you like to explain what the connection is?
No, I think it's better that they just imagine for themselves why that is. Okay, so in 2014, I started a business called Man v Fat. Prior to 2014, I was getting up for around 20 stone and lost the weight before I started Man v Fat, but really struggled to do so because so much of the weight loss industry is focused on women. And it really doesn't seem to ever, occur to the weight loss industry that the men are also wanting to lose weight. Mm-hmm. In actual fact, if you look at the statistics around weight loss, there are more men who are overweight and obese than women, about 67% to about 57%. I kept thinking, I'm sure it can't just be me that thinks this, that I want to lose weight and I want support to do that. And so I joined Weight Watchers and Slimming World and those sorts of things. And the information that they were giving was so targeted to women. And I think the sort of tipping point for me was when I was at a Weight Watchers meeting and the little talk that they had after everyone had weighed in was about how, your period can affect your weight. Strangely, that wasn't my issue. So I think initially it was a digital magazine and then it became a book. And it really did acquire its own momentum as more men found out about it and started to come to it. And in 2016, we launched the first league, a football league. So Man v Fat Football is a program that is exclusively for overweight and obese men. And the idea that I had was that all the guys would weigh in before they played like 6-a-side game of football. But the weigh-in also had an impact on the score, which meant that you had these crazy situations in Man v Fat football games where a team can be absolutely thrashed on the pitch and lose 13-0, but they end up winning overall because all of their players have lost weight. And obviously we are a weight loss organization, so weight loss is the more important thing than the football.
How the world comes to an end is a zombie plague.
People often describe them as zombies, but I sort of saw them more as this kind of separate category. That the direct inspiration for what Ben calls the wraths was the comment section in Daily Mail articles.
Because we've got a question. We
had two different perspectives on where the rats might have come from.
Two different theories.
And so far you're leaning my way, so I'm liking this.
Oh, you think so? What was your way?
Well, I said that I thought they embodied the divisiveness and hostility in our current society, and I've actually written down here the bottom half of the internet, and I stopped short of naming the Daily Mail, but that was what I was thinking.
And I thought it was possibly a metaphor for his inner demons.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, you're both right. You both get 5 points.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, it's both of those things. So in the story, the rats, who are kind of eternal. They don't need to eat, they don't need to sleep, but they are just fury. They are filled with rage and filled with bile and every form of prejudice.
So if you'd told me at the beginning of the year that I would be reading a book about a zombie apocalypse, and for a large portion of the time, the main character, Ben, would only be talking to his dog, and I would have finished the book and enjoyed it by the end, I wouldn't have believed you. Ben is such a lovable character. Where did he come from?
I had interviewed a lot of guys through Man v Fat who had lost a considerable amount of weight, and we called them amazing losers. And so some of the guys who I'd interviewed were shut-ins and were that sort of weight.
Really?
Yeah, sadly possible to reach 600 plus pounds.
What is 600 pounds in stones?
Oh gosh, I'm gonna have to do that calculator. Sorry.
David's looking basically 43 stone.
So I interviewed a guy called Graham, who was at one point Britain's heaviest man, and he was 58 stone. Ben shares a lot of his characteristics in that he looks at where he was at that point and when he was at his heaviest, and he said, you know, one of the really sad things was you become a tyrant because you have to have things in the way that you want them to sustain that. So, you know, he would be very forceful with family members about, you know, them getting food for him and takeaways, and, you know, so that he could fulfill that addiction. And so where did Ben come from? He was a collection of those characters who I had met. I think I had learned about compassion a lot more and being more compassionate to a group of people who I think it's all too easy to go put down the McDonald's and stop being lazy. And that's the answer. There's a horrible phrase that people use around weight loss, which is eat less, move more. The thing that I always thought was so barbaric about that as a phrase is that it completely overlooks why people aren't implementing that very simple, very true, very efficient, effective advice in their lives. So is it the fact, you know, people often look at people and go, oh, well, it's because he's too stupid to know. They obviously don't know. Well, people do know that. There are financial pressures. There are mental health pressures. There are situational pressures around, say, for example, truck drivers having to, you know, work incredibly long hours and only being able to access food easily through service stations, for example. There are a whole number of factors, and then they get beaten with that stick of eat less, move more. I think that was my main goal in writing Before and After, is that I wanted to show some compassion to Ben. Lots of people do criticize it and say that it's fat phobic because Ben is a bigger guy and that he wants to change. But, you know, there is still far too much evidence that weighing less is better for you physically. Ben wants to lose weight. He doesn't want to be in the situation that he is. And he has a compulsive behavior. He has an addiction, and it's only in these incredible circumstances that he's able to look at that. And to your point earlier about what the wraths mean, the wrath who is for the entire book is suspended outside of his window is absolutely his inner demon. And it's the voice that all of us use with regards to ourselves sometimes, about that is not kind in any way, shape or form.
You mentioned several times compassion. I think one of the things I loved about Ben is he's driven by compassion.
Yeah.
When he finally does start getting out of his flat, it's for Brown, his dog.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you this, you know this, you wrote them. There's a second book, Flesh and Blood, which carries on Ben's adventures. And there he's very driven by compassion for others. That's one of the things that makes him such a compelling character. You're not just painting him as a shut-in fat bloke.
Yeah.
He's a real human.
He's gorgeous. Down to the fact that the biggest surprise about him is that he's a vegan.
Yeah.
Yes. Because is that possible to be that overweight and vegan?
Absolutely it is. Yeah. I mean, you can still access Domino's pizzas, Pringles, crisps and chocolates and, you know, the sort of junk food. Ben eats bourbon biscuits compulsively, which is why that is on the front cover. I think even Skittles, some Skittles are vegan. Unfortunately, even for vegans, is the risk of ultra-processed foods and things that aren't designed to be particularly healthy for us to eat.
One of the things that I thought was quite telling was, on the one hand, you could be cynical and say Ben loses the impressive amount of weight that he loses in the book because he can't eat anything, because he's cut off from food. But at the same time, there's the moment where he discovers a stash of biscuits. Initially, he starts to fall into the old pattern of, I will devour them. And then he gains a mastery over the food, and he's controlling it and eating on his terms.
At the beginning of the interview, I said that if I write in any genre, I believe that, or what I want to do is write in the genre of hope, because I believe that now more than ever, part of what people are looking for are stories about hope and about why it's okay to hope. I wanted to put into Before and After a number of different ways that we can hope. So I didn't want to be prescriptive. I never want to I'm a Christian myself, but I never want to force that down people's throats. What I wanted to do was signpost the fact that there are a number of ways that people find and derive hope in modern life. It may be through, it may be through faith. It may be through love for others, for love for animals. It may be through punk music, and that, I think, is the thing that I'm probably most proud about for Before and After and Flesh and Blood. I think without becoming cheesy, I hope, although other reviewers have said that it is far too prescriptive and it does Bible bash, it points towards the fact that there is hope out there, and that even in, Ben is in the very worst situation he could possibly be in. He has every reason not to succeed. But as you say, in Ben's case, it is his love for his dog that pushes him to believe in something and to believe that life has value and meaning.
So Ben's mum has died long before the book, but she's still a huge figure in it. She's got a real devotion to her son and shows some real strength of character. Where did she come from?
I grew up with my mum and my grandma, and they were both very strong, very empowered women. And I think that they are the blueprints for Anne, Ben's mum. I'm just going to let my dog in. Sorry, one sec. So this is my dog, Quinn, who is a Manchester Terrier like Brown in the book.
Ah.
Oh, that's what one looks like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Ben's relationship to Brown and your relationship to your dog, very similar?
Well, Quinn's a bit of a sort of remarkable one, really, because it was in researching for Before and After, I knew that it needed to be a Manchester Terrier in the book, partly because it's set in Manchester, but also because of a number of the sort of characteristics of the breed. So, and I went and interviewed the president of the British Manchester Terrier Association, who weirdly lived down the road from, or around sort of the next village over, which I didn't know. And she said, oh, well, when we have puppies, we'll put you on the list. And I sort of didn't think anything of it at the time. And then about a year later, after the book was out, she rang and said, oh, great, one of our dogs is pregnant, and we'll let you know. And I don't think I was part of the conversation that agreed to it in a way. But so she just sort of arrived, and we'd never had dogs before. And
No.
we'd always had lots of cats. And so Quinn just sort of arrived and was instantly part of the family and part of our life. So she came out of the book, bizarrely. I wrote her into being.
Ben's mum homeschools him when he basically refuses to go to school anymore. What she teaches him lays the foundation, really interestingly, for most of his survival.
Absolutely, yeah. And so a lot of the book of Before and After looks at why Ben is in the situation that he's in. And part of that is just this inability for organizations and people in Ben's life to understand that he is struggling. And so his mum devises her own curriculum, and they work through it. And yeah, you're right, that then becomes a sort of a contributing factor to his survival, which is,
Do you know any homeschoolers?
I know lots of homeschoolers, yes. And I think it's a really great option, especially for girls, is my opinion.
And are they well equipped for when the zombie apocalypse
Absolutely.
befalls
Yeah.
us?
If there is a zombie apocalypse, find yourself a homeschooled person, and
That's a great tip.
Flesh and Blood, we're introduced to the character Natalie.
Mhm.
You reveal what the medical route of the Wraths is.
Yeah.
She isn't suffering from it, but to some extent holds it back and fights it off.
yeah,
And I thought that was fascinating because in the first book, we accept that the Wraths need to be killed.
Yeah.
They're an obstacle in the way of Ben, and it's not a cruel thing. They're monsters who will destroy him, and he's got to keep himself safe. And we buy into that. I felt in Flesh and Blood, while we still see plenty more evisceration that we can cheer on, you actually humanise the Wraths as well. And through Natalie, we start to see them as the humans they once were.
yeah,
Was that a deliberate showing of that side?
yeah. The thing that sometimes horrifies people most about those books is that the origin of Wraths is a real thing. So there is a parasite called Toxoplasma gondii, which women often know because they're often warned about it when they're pregnant, about toxoplasmosis. It's estimated by some research that 60% of the world's population have this particular parasite, and it's insisted. So that means it's stuck in your brain. So there is a reasonable chance that between the two of you, one of you will have this particular parasite. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news.
I would explain lots. It would explain why I can't remember whether I brushed my teeth.
But for a long time, people thought that this, toxoplasmosis was just sort of a thing that people pick up. It's from cats when they dig in the dirt and sort of with their own feces and things. And that's why women, when they're pregnant, are told not to do the cat litter. And also to wash vegetables and all that sort of stuff. They thought for a long time that this having the parasite didn't make any difference. But statistical evidence is now starting to show that actually having it might have a number of impacts, such as increased rage, not in the way that the Wraths are. Obviously, I sort of magnified that. Actually, suicide is one of the things that they think there is a statistical change on. Car crashes, bizarrely, you are potentially more likely to be in a car crash if you have this particular parasite. So it's a real thing, and often I've had a number of people tell me that they actually had the test for toxoplasmosis after reading the books, because you can get a home kit for it.
Before I do get the test, can you do anything about it or is it just depressing?
No, you can't do anything about it.
No.
Natalie, in the book, she is treated for toxoplasmosis during her pregnancy.
Right.
And that is enough to kind of make her half Wrath, essentially. But yeah, it's a real thing.
One of the things I enjoyed in Flesh and Blood was there's a running debate between Ben and Natalie as to the roles of destiny and random chance in their situation, their outcome. And Ben very much leans to the view that it's meant to be happening, and there's an overarching plan, whereas Natalie is very much the opposite to that. And I read that as being quite even-handed and not pushing the reader one way or the other.
Ben, in that book, is someone who is struggling with his faith. He has these conversations with the priest about, whether he can cheat his way to heaven and whether this is...
Bart Simpsoning.
Bart Simpsoning it, yeah. Can you do like a presto changeo, quick deathbed confession, and it's all okay? But I think the what I wanted there was to have a more human example of faith there. And part of faith is about questioning faith and,
Yes.
not being sure. And I think that that's what I wanted Ben to be going through. And that continues on to Flesh and Blood as well, that overall he sort of works his way, despite all of the things that he's been through, towards a belief in something good. But he certainly goes through the ringer in terms of whether or not he does believe, and, anger and feeling betrayed, all of those things, which I think is a good thing to show from a faith perspective, because I think it's more true.
You've been a journalist and you're a screenwriter as well.
Mm-hmm.
How have these affected your writing, and are either of them responsible for it being so visceral?
Yeah, I think so. I think being a journalist taught me everything that I know about writing, in the sense that it taught me to always hit deadlines, which I think is probably the most important thing when it comes to writing. There's my favorite piece of advice for myself and for anyone who's writing is don't get it right, get it written. And the key to a lot of journalism is you've got to finish your story, and then it can go through an editing process, then you can rewrite it. And learning to get through that, I think, really helped me as a writer now. It's so hardwired into me that if I say I'm going to do this, I will do it, even at great detriment to myself. It's just, that's the way that I am built now. I think as well, the journalism that I was doing, certainly in the freelance, was incredibly dull. So I've written for wheat publications.
Wheat, as in
the crop,
the cereal,
as in the cereal. Yeah, wheat, and
the kind of publications that get blacked out on Have I Got News for You?
Yeah, absolutely. Wheat Monthly, and you know what? I think I wrote for Wheat Insurance magazine.
No.
Yeah, at some point. So, I mean, I've written for some of the most phenomenally dull topics. But I think what that taught me was that there are no dull topics. There's only ways that you approach it. We could do another podcast where I could tell you about the intriguing things about wheat insurance.
I think we'll have viewers queuing up for that one.
So I think that really taught me that it's about how you approach a topic, and that there is always an interesting angle on something. Screenwriting came a bit later, but it's a great way of learning dialogue, particularly. I love writing dialogue and hearing the voices in a good way.
Yeah. We know what you mean.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Where can people find you online?
Oh, my name is Andrew Shanahan, and so Shan is what most people call me. So Shan, SHAN, is writing, WRITING. And I think I'm probably most active at the moment on TikTok, which I am so too old for, but I really enjoy. So I'm upping the average age of TikTok by about 9 years just by my mere presence. But I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, and my Substack, which is helloshan.co.uk, is kind of where I keep most of my information about the books and what's coming out next.
Brilliant.
Lots of ways that people can engage with you.
Far too many, Steve.
If they want to, if they want to buy the books, what's the best way of them doing that?
As much as I would like to break free of the Amazon death grip on creativity, probably Amazon. I work with a fantastic narrator called Chris Devon, who has read all of my books so far on Audible. If you want to buy direct from me, just send me a message through any of those channels, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and I'll sort that out, because there is an online bookshop as well.
Awesome.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been
Wonderful.
Fantastic fun.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Very welcome. Thank you.
As someone who struggles to define what my genre is, I thought his answer of he likes to see him as a genre of hope, I thought was fascinating.
I really like that. Yes. Yes. And I think he's right. I think that probably explains why I managed to get through the book and actually enjoy it by the end.
Yes, you weren't entirely sold when I said, let's get this guy on who's written a story of epic weight loss in a zombie apocalypse.
No, I was not, to be honest. But actually, I am really glad. Once again, I am glad I've been made to read something that I wouldn't normally read.
If you're watching this and you're intrigued by Andrew's books, they're well worth a read, whether they're the kind of thing you would naturally pick up or not. And the same applies with all our other authors.